One of the first jobs that the new government led by Ebert had to do in 1919 was write a constitution for the new German Republic. A constitution is a set of rules which lay out how a country is run. So it'll set out rules for things like how elections take place, how often they take place, and what job or what powers people like the Chancellor or the President have. The constitution that they created was hailed as being one of the most democratic constitutions in the world, as it guaranteed freedoms and rights for everyone, such as the vote for everyone over 20, freedoms of speech, press, assembly, freedom of religion, all of those types of things that you would get in a modern democracy. Well, Germany had that in 1919. One of the key core weaknesses, though, of the constitution was how they selected people to sit in the Reichstag. This is a picture of the German Reichstag, which essentially is the parliament of Germany. And this is where the laws are made, and parties would fight in elections to win seats in the Reichstag. Obviously, the more seats you would get, the more control you had of what laws were being made in the Reichstag. So the system that they chose in the new constitution for electing people to the Reichstag was called proportional representation, which you can shorten to PR. And PR meant that people would vote for parties rather than voting for candidates or people. And then the party was given a percentage of the seats in the Reichstag. So to put that simply, if you gained 10% of the seats in the Reichstag, if you gained 10% of the votes in the election, you would gain 10% of the seats in the Reichstag. Alright? So really a party would only need to get a few thousand votes across the whole of Germany to get a seat in the Reichstag. This encouraged lots of parties to form and to stand for election because they knew they had a good chance of getting a seat in the Reichstag. So here you can see a ballot form for an election in 1924, and you can see that there are 36 parties standing for election. How that left the Reichstag looking was like this. So this pie chart shows the percentage of seats that each party won in the 1924 election. You can see that the SPD, which is the Socialist Party led by Ebert, was the largest party, but it does not have a majority. It cannot control the Reichstag. So it needs to work with 3 or 4 other parties in order to get control. So PR led to no party having a majority, and it led to coalition governments. A coalition government is a government where 2 or more parties have to work together to run the country. Coalition governments are weak because you've got 2 parties with different ideas trying to work together, and quite often what happens is that they argue and they fall out, and then another election has to be called. Between 1919 and 1933, there was an election almost every year in Germany. Another weakness of the Weimar Constitution was Article 48. This allowed the President to rule by decree in times of emergency without consulting the Reichstag. So essentially, the President could rule like a dictator. This rule wasn't used very often in the early years of the Weimar Republic, but as you'll see later, it becomes very important in the 1930s. So, to sum up, the strengths of the Weimar Constitution are that it was a very democratic constitution which guaranteed people a lot of freedoms. Proportional representation made sure that all parties could be represented in the Reichstag and all shades of opinion in the country would be listened to. And Article 48 meant that the country could be run or ruled, and even if there was a crisis happening, such as a putsch or an economic crisis. The weaknesses of the Constitution were that the freedoms in it guaranteed not freedoms just to regular people, but to everyone. So extremists like the Nazis and the Communists were free to operate openly and to distribute their ideas, and to, in the case of the Nazis, to encourage people to overthrow the government. PR led to lots of parties, which made the Reichstag very difficult, made passing laws in the Reichstag very, very difficult. And Article 48 could be used in the future to undermine the very democracy that Ebert and his party had set up.